we are good to go. Okay.
Well, you're right, though.
And we're ready to start. Excuse us for being a little late, 15 minutes, but we had to wait for some technical difficulties to be fixed, and now we are set. I'd like to read first a note to the residents. All citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person. Meetings are also live streamed and archived by the Franklin TV on the Franklin Town Hall TV and YouTube channel. Meetings are also shown live and on repeat on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29. In an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. Link to the access meeting via Zoom for the July 18th meeting is for the Zoom link, and you hit here, then click Open Zoom. Or copy and paste this URI into your browser, and call-in phone number, call 1-929-205-6099 and enter meeting ID, which is number 886-7954-1425, and then press pound. Okay? And we will begin. The first item on our agenda this evening is for the town clerk to come up and swear us all in. This committee is the Davis-Thayer Reuse Advisory Committee. It's a subcommittee, and we shall stand.
And raise your right hand,
And
please.
raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Davis-Thayer Building Reuse Advisory Committee to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations.
Nancy, thank you so much for coming. It
Of
makes it
course.
much easier for all of us.
Absolutely.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're not gonna stay and just have.
Make sure you put the right channel on. We gotta rub it in.
Thank you again. Next, we're going to do member introductions. So what I would hope that you would do is when we begin, give your full name and then a little bit of background about you, okay? Just so that the people out there will know who's who and maybe why your interest of being on this committee, okay? Roberta, we can begin with you if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Chairman Pellegri. My name is Roberta Trahan. I'm a lifelong resident of Franklin, former school committee member for 10 years, and serve on various volunteer committees within the town. And I was honored to be asked to serve on the Davis-Thayer Reuse Advisory Committee because it's important what happens to that building to the town, and I hope to make an impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta.
My name is Sam Williams. I've lived in Franklin for about 6 years now. I am the chairperson of the Design Review Commission. I am also an architect, and I live in what would have been the Davis-Thayer district. I just am interested in making sure that the town makes the best use of the property.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Greg Rondo, lifelong resident of Franklin, also chairman of the planning board, and I've been in the construction industry for approximately 40 years, so I think my knowledge of the industry would be beneficial for the Davis-Thayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I am Patrick Sheridan. I'm on the town council. I live like a block away from Davis-Thayer. My kids went there, and I've lived in Franklin since 2008.
Thank you. Next, Chris?
Chris Stickney, live on High Street, so also in the former Davis-Thayer School Committee, School District. Been in town for about 8 years now, and been in commercial real estate for about 10 years as an appraiser.
I'm Gwyneth Morris. I've lived in Franklin for approximately 6 years. and I am an accountant with about 13 years experience. I'm currently director in corporate accounting at Fidelity, so I have a lot of real estate experience and hoping to give, input as necessary. I'm very eager also to get the best use possible out of the building.
Great. My name is Megan McCarthy. I have been a resident of Franklin for 2 years now. I live on Dean Ave. I am a strategy officer for a philanthropic foundation. My background is in nonprofits and participatory feedback and surveying is part of my work there. This is my first engagement with the town, and so excited to be here. And I also live in the district that would have been Davis Thayer's. And I'm just invested in making sure that the town puts it to good use.
Thank you, Megan. Okay. Ted?
Hi, Ted Cormier Ledger from the Town Council. Been in Franklin since 2017. Just very interested to make sure that we utilize this important asset as a community to the best of our ability.
And my name is Debbie Pellegri. I have been involved with the town for many years. First as town clerk for 31 years, and then I am currently a member of the Franklin Town Council. I wanted to be a part of this because I not only went to the school there myself, my husband, my children, parents, everybody went to this school, and it means an awful lot to me. So I wanted to be sure we choose the right avenue to take for this school. And there are many avenues to take, so we have to just take that minute or two to listen to what anybody has to say. Thank you. I'd also like to, at this time, let me just check this off. Before we go into three, no, I think I'll wait till afterward. Legal overview, the open meeting, public records, and ethics laws. Jamie, is this something you're just going to go over briefly, or do you have handouts, or?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, through the committee. So with the town clerk just giving the oath, and this kind of being a new night where it's just we're so used to committees just already being formed and doing them that it's strange to have a new committee. But I thought it would be helpful for everybody who's new to have the town attorney's kind of, I think it's about 20 pages, which is an overview he normally hands out after every election at the council level, which all of you are familiar with. Just a couple of the highlights. You can read through it. Folks can ask questions of myself, Amy, Mike, any of the staff, obviously any of the counselors who are planning board members who are used to this stuff, or any of the other materials. But there's a lot of things as part of a public board that kind of defy common logic of modern society. And the most common one is the open meeting law. Just to caution people to not reply to all to emails. Replying to all has got to be the most easy thing to do, right? Like, obviously, who doesn't hit reply to all? Technically, when you reply to all and engage in a conversation as a committee on an email, technically that's a violation of the open meeting law, because we're all supposed to do it here. So folks out in the audience here can come in, Zoom, we've made it hybrid. If you can't find us, you're probably hiding under a rock. We're in so many places on YouTube and everywhere. And then the second big piece of this is the ethics law, which really revolves around nobody on the board can do anything to benefit financially from any of the work that we're doing on the Davis Thayer Committee. I mean, that's the heart and soul of it. In this long document, there's a lot of other finer points. I would just encourage everybody to take a look through it. If anybody has any questions, there's more than enough materials online. The town attorney, myself, the staff are all available. I just wanted to make those couple points, Madam Chair, as kind of the highlights of the packet, but the town attorney did synthesize all three of those laws really down. All the emails conducted by the committee are also susceptible to the public records law, although I will say that as you saw in the agenda, there's a lot of material. We just put everything right out there usually at the council meetings. If you look at them, all the agenda packets, the planning board, all the materials, plans, everything are part of those packets. So, we don't usually get a lot of those requests, primarily because we already put everything out there. But just so that folks are aware that any communications that go on are technically a part of the open meeting law. So, Madam Chair, that's my very, very short overview on these items, and certainly if there's any questions, we'll do the best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. And just so that you all know that there are, in your packet, you have all of these, so you
Right.
can just read them over and memorize them. You're gonna be tested. No, I'm only kidding. So we've gone over those, and we're set with that. The committee charge review. We're not here, this committee, to make the final decision. We are looking into different ways that this school can be used. And there are many of them, from listening to people out on the streets, listening to people on other committees, and all of that. But we are going to discuss them. And what I would say to everyone is, you may have come here this evening with something in your mind, that this is what you'd like to see the school be. I would say don't have that in whatever, because have it so that you're going to be able to go back to it and think. But I mean, be open-minded to anybody else's thoughts on the school, because you may want to change your mind. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of just myself, because I've spoken to people over the year since the school was closed. And I said I would really like to see the school be for veterans housing or affordable housing. Well, that's just a thought that I had. And I'm putting that in the back of my mind now so that I can listen to what everyone else has to say, because I've listened and heard some very good thoughts already from other people. So let's have an open mind, and we'll see, what we can do. Does anyone have a question about that? You're fine with that? Okay, that's good.
Madam Chair, do you think it would be a good idea for me to read the charge so that the public knows?
Sure, I think that might be very good. Good thinking. Go right ahead.
So just for the purposes of everybody here tonight and those watching from home, we thought it would be a good idea to quickly read the summary for the committee. So the Davis Thayer Building Reuse Advisory Committee, whereas the Town Council desires to establish a Davis Thayer Building Reuse Advisory Committee to evaluate potential strategies and future uses for the building and parcel of land the building is located on. Now therefore, the Franklin Town Council hereby establishes the Davis Thayer Building Reuse Advisory Committee as follows. The Town Council is determined to appoint no more than 9 members to this committee, including 3 members of the Franklin Town Council, 1 member of the Franklin Planning Board, and 5 members at large. That's why you see 9 of us up here tonight. The town administrator shall nominate all 9 members of the committee to be ratified by the Town Council. The chair of the Town Council will select the chair, vice chair, and clerk. Terms of the committee shall end on December 31st of this year. Duties of the committee are as follows: conduct an assessment of the current conditions and possible uses, conduct a market appraisal of the property, engage community stakeholders and citizen input through a public listening series, and evaluate potential future uses, and thus make a final report to the Town Council by December 23rd of this year. And this resolution shall become effective according to the provisions of the Town Home Rule Charter. So that's why we're here, just basic summary to get everybody up to speed.
That was a good idea. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
All right, the committee charge and review. They're set with that. Overview and discussion on the current study by Castle Booze Associates, Inc. We're going to go with historical materials and studies on the Davis Thayer. And we have someone to represent, or Mike, you're going to introduce.
Just, yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm Mike D'Angelo. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm the Director of Public Facilities for the town of Franklin. I've actually worked in Franklin for the last 25 years and built most of the buildings here. So, I have 2 representatives from Castle Booze here tonight. Castle Booze did the study in 2013 when we were looking is it worthwhile to expand the school, what's it worth, what are we gonna do? And Joe Milani ran the study for Castle Booze at that point. A lot of interesting, you do have a link to it. When we finally finished, some of the amounts were staggering just for handicap accessibility. The addition, it was gonna be a 35 or 40 million easy project. And we decided not to do anything at that point. So we hired Castle Booze specifically. I have Paul Dominov here, principal of Castle Booze, and he can get us started on the what they're doing for us. We hired them back in maybe January, and they've been in the building with all their engineers. Joe's been through the building, they've been looking at it, they've been going, and it's all the original engineering firms that did the study. This is an update of the study. And then they're gonna still be working for us. And I can let Paul explain that to you and get you started. And they'll be doing a presentation, going through some of the highlights of where the study's going. So probably the biggest thing is, we had comments today, you know, where is the study? The study isn't done, so the study's partially done. But you're gonna be a part of the rest of the study. That's the way, you know, any building committee would work. And they're gonna evaluate things. So they've done a piece, and there's another big piece, and that's when the study will actually be completed, when they've done all their work, they've presented it to the committee, you've given, you know, questions, answers, everything. So I just want to make that, they can go into it further for you, but I'm going to get this out. Paul?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Again, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Paul Dominoff, Castle Booze, architect, here with Ms. Joe Milani. Mike gave a great background. We did the study 10 years ago, and then things evolved, and we're back. We tried to assemble the basic same team who had the history before, and just kind of to set what we're currently signed up for as Castle Booze is to update the study we did 10 years ago, to go into the building with our engineers and see if anything changed, to update everything. It's an existing conditions report. And then, because this group, our understanding is we didn't know where it was really going to go. This group hadn't been formed yet. Once this is formed, there'll be discussions of what this may be. So we're currently signed up to do an existing facilities report update, and then listen and come up with, if there's some ideas out there to kind of generate a list of pros and cons of different ideas, if it's repurposed into this type of facility and that. And currently, because at the time Mike signed this up 4 months ago, we didn't know how this was going to proceed. It was still a little bit open. So that's what we're currently signed up for right now, the existing facilities report, plus some back and forth, and then a kind of a pros and cons list of different ideas. And I'm sure after that process, there'll be a next step in kind of a more definitive direction on where this should go. What is the highest and best use for Davis Thayer, which we're very interested in helping you on. But with that, for tonight, Joe's prepared just to show you the updated report in its draft form, and then we can open up the discussion for our next steps. So
Thank you.
thanks for having us.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
My turn?
And Joe, your turn.
Thank you. I'm Joe Milani. I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint or anything entertaining to show you tonight. We just have the report. I thought this was a small gathering with Mike and a few friends, and that's the reason for my attire tonight, so I would dress up, and I know I'm in front of a formal committee. So we did this updated report on the Davis Thayer School, looking at the existing conditions and the fitness of the building, hoping to assist the committee in narrowing down the possibilities you might have for reuse of the building. We've looked at a number of different aspects of the building. It's difficult to project everything in the future. Code compliance varies depending on what kind of building you're going to use, what your use group is, what the actual use of the building is going to be. A few things we do know, and we'll present those tonight based on our part of the study and our two consultants from our structural engineer and our HVAC, electrical, and mechanical, and also on the call too. So starting off, we looked at the code compliance of the building, and a couple of different use groups. We're assuming that the reuse of the building would be generally a business use group, possibly with an assembly use within it, since you have some large open spaces within the building. The existing building has a large, well, it's not real large, but it has a gymnasium space. It has a two-story open sort of library space, and it has a cafeteria space. And so all those could be assembled together to be a larger assembly space that might be used for that sort of use, or it could be broken up into offices or classrooms or whatever. We don't know what the use will be, and we don't intend to influence you in your decision. We look for your feedback to get an idea, as Paul mentioned, where we go in our next step, and we're here to support you in making that decision. The building itself is code compliant with, because it's a small footprint. It's only about a few thousand square feet per floor, so virtually any use group would be suitable for the building in terms of code compliance and the size of the building and what you'd have to put in it. Right now, like I said, there's an education use group which we wouldn't expect to be reused. If it was used for a collegiate, and I only mentioned that because it was mentioned that the Dean College is right next door, and if it was sold to Dean College, it could be used for collegiate, because collegiate is not considered an educational use group, it's considered a business use group. Being a business use group, it does have its own sort of restrictions, but the square footage of the building allows all aspects of a business use group to be utilized in the building. Handicap accessibility is a real problem in the building. We mentioned this, as Mike said before, there was a high cost to make the building accessible for future use as a school. A couple of things that it doesn't have an elevator, so you cannot access the different floors of the building. You can only access the first floor through a ramp and one entrance. It doesn't have accessible egress. All the egresses in the building have to be accessible, and as like I said, there's only one ramp going out of the building. The doors in the building are too narrow for wheelchair use. They don't have the right clearances for wheelchair use. The stairs do not have the right handrail heights, that sort of thing. It's in the report. There's a lot of issues that I wouldn't say are simple to resolve, but they're not difficult with the right funding to resolve. I don't want to make it seem like, you can do anything you want with the right amount of money, but that's actually the truth. You can do whatever you want with the right amount of money. But if we're looking at feasibility, the one thing you have to do is the accessibility upgrades, no matter what the use is. With the estimated value of the building, the assessed value of the building, you don't have to spend about $800,000 in renovation costs to trigger full compliance with the current accessibility code. And so we would assume, and we are assuming in our report, that full compliance will be necessary for, as I said, elevator access, stair access, toilet rooms, doors and widths, egress elements, all those sorts of things that have to do with handicap accessibility would have to be redone in the building. Primarily, we're looking at the building being virtually a gut for most uses. It really doesn't have a suitability in terms of accessibility for a general turnover, either to let another, department from the town come in and use the building and just walk in, or selling the building, have someone just walk in. It does require a lot of renovation work for accessibility, and that's a given no matter what. In terms of egress throughout the building, the doors are sufficient in size, the stairs are sufficient in size. We'll have to add some handrails in the building to be of a certain height, modify the stairs a little bit under the International Existing Building Code, which this would fall under. There are some elements of the building that have to be revised no matter what, and stair treads and things, but those are pretty easily resolved for not a lot of investment. One thing I will say is that as of July 1, the new stretch energy code was promulgated by the state. I see you making a face. And with it also the specialized and opt-in energy code was promulgated. That has to be voted on in town meeting to be adopted by a town. But as Franklin is a stretch code green community, all the elements of the new stretch code would have to be utilized in the building also for renovation. Because in this version of the stretch code where previously renovations and additions were exempt, in this stretch code, renovations and additions are part of the code. As it was only promulgated July 1, we have not looked at it in terms of this study. This study was done a few months ago. We could do that. It may not change that much in terms of what's going on. It really is more energy related than anything in terms of changes to the stretch code. I would like to turn it over, if I can, to our structural engineer. Is it Rich or Chris is on the line? Rich. Rich?
Yeah, hi, this is Rich Lewandowski from RZ Design Associates in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. What did you want me to talk about, Joe? I mean, the building is...
I think the important
pretty-
thing, Rich, is to talk about the fitness of the structure and the conditions for category 3 and 4 uses in the building.
Well, I assume everyone's read the report.
Nope.
No.
No? Okay, well, do you want me to read it? I mean, it's not that
No,
long, but...
we want you just to, if you could describe the uses that would be sort of downgraded in terms of feasibility for category 3 and 4, that would be helpful. I do have something here too I could help you out with. So explain what category 3 and 4 is. Start with that.
Well, I defer to your narrative for the level of work to be performed. I really didn't describe level 3, the different, because it can't go up in grade because it's an unreinforced masonry building, right? It was built in 1924. So the uses are limited, so definitely not a police station, definitely not an emergency operations center, things like that are just out of the question.
So according to the building code, category 4 and category 3 are seismic risk categories that categorize building uses and how the structure is designed. Under category 4, it includes buildings that are essential facilities in case of emergency, like police stations, fire stations, ambulatory care, emergency shelters, dispatch centers, that sort of thing. You cannot use this building for that under its current condition, but Rich, you could modify the structure to provide that at some expense.
Yes, I mean, we'd have to go in and add structural steel frames, brace the walls, and I don't think it's
Feasible.
feasible, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I do have a portion of the report that talks about seismic loadings and risk categories 3 and 4.
Yep.
Basically just reiterated what I just said. So.
And then category 3, which is also restricted for buildings that don't have the proper seismic protections, would be buildings that have a substantial hazard to human life in the event of a failure. Not that they're supporting the community in the event of a hazard, but these are hazardous to human life if they fail. That would primarily be large assembly buildings that have assembly spaces greater than 2,500 people. My calculations show that this building would have a total occupancy maximum of about 730 people. And that's with all the existing assembly space used as assembly spaces at a much lower occupancy rate at 7 square feet per person. And the business use is occupied at 150 square feet per person. And that's just allocated based on the square footage that's in the building now. I don't know how the building would be reused, if it would be more assembly space or less assembly space, and that would change, obviously, the quantity and the population of the building. For students above the 12th grade, which would be a collegiate thing, occupant load of greater than 500 would also be category 3. We would have to work with that. Like, as I said, we're at 730 students right now, or 730 people in the building right now, so we would exceed that. And that might limit what we could use this for in terms of a collegiate building. And then group I3 occupancies and other I2 occupancies, which are institutional occupancies. I3 typically is used in lockups for police stations, small jails, detention centers, but not, prisons, that kind of thing. I2 is more or less incapacitated hospital residents that need assistance in moving in and out of a building in case of an emergency to exit. So, the building itself is, as you can see on the screen, is partly concrete framed, which was a surprise to me back when it was built. So it does have some sturdiness to it. The problem with it is that it is fairly brittle because it's non-reinforced load-bearing masonry with concrete. As best we can tell from the documents that we have from the renovation that was done in 70s, yeah. It does not mention that the walls were reinforced at that point or supplemented. And so we're assuming that based on the construction at the time of it was constructed, it's a very brittle building. Which is why, as Rich was saying, it would cost significant money to bring it up to a seismic category 3 or 4. So this page you can see is not coming in a full screen. How do I get a full page? You don't know? I'll just scroll up. You can see that there's a small area of infill in the upper right that was added to the cafeteria space overlooking the existing bleachers that were in the gymnasium, which you can see on the upper left side of the screen. That was done to expand the space of the cafeteria, just for seating, I'm guessing, and storage, right?
Correct.
At the time. And then below you can see some exterior space, interior spaces for boiler rooms, mechanical rooms, showing the construction there. This is the gymnasium at the top, typical steel construction, load-bearing masonry on the perimeter walls. On the right-hand side, you can see that upper wall above the bleachers. That is where we just looked at the floor infill being done to enclose that space. Obviously, there's a great opportunity to remove that and make that restore the bleachers so that it does become a new assembly space. There are a lot of intriguing opportunities here. I won't dismiss anything right now because the arrangement of the spaces in the school make it very enticing for a lot of different uses. Below that is a photograph of the 2-story library space, which unfortunately is not very acoustically designed. I know it was at one time an auditorium, Mike, right? And it had
There was
films.
some type of stage and
Theater and
plays
stuff.
that were done in there.
But it's not, it could be made to be more suitable as a reading space or something with some acoustical treatments, but right now it doesn't have that condition. And then up in the attic space, the roof is framed out of wood framing, whereas the rest of the building is not necessarily wood framed. We do find that the framing, Rich, I'm gonna go from your report, is in fairly good condition, although it is, very old, but it's in fairly good condition. It doesn't seem to have created any sagging on the roof in terms of low points, low spots, and seems to still allow the roof to drain fairly well. Any issues with the roof, Rich, you want to mention?
No, it was pretty free and clear of obstacles and mechanical units. And if you go back a couple screens to the roof framing, that's where I left my tape measure, in case anybody.
Top right.
Next time you're up there, Mike, you have to grab that.
Yeah.
Put that on the expense report, Rich.
All right.
The real issue with the school, as I said, structurally, is the limitations it might have for reuse as an emergency use facility because of the limitations it has for category 3 and 4 use for risk categories for seismic. And again, anything can be done for the right amount of money. But it will take a substantial amount of money to do something, and it's really difficult in a building like this to do that sensitively, so you don't wind up with large brace frames and other things going through spaces. So that would be sort of I think a lower priority on the list of things that we might want to consider using the building for, any kind of emergency access or emergency situation building. Architecturally, the building is in pretty good shape. It's been maintained fairly well. The outside veneer is in pretty good shape. It does need some repointing here and there. There are unit ventilators throughout the building. You can see here places where those unit ventilator openings have been closed up. This is a unit ventilator grill here. As we get into the HVAC discussion, we'll note that this is an antiquated type of system to use. It doesn't function very well now either, does it?
It's
When it was
pneumatic, an
Yeah.
old pneumatic control system.
So not to take any of the steam away from our HVAC engineer, but the recommendation was to gut the building for its HVAC system simply because it's so antiquated. We never use in schools, just as a point of note, that we never use unit ventilators in schools anymore. That was the way to do it back in the day because every classroom had their own control. But these days, the unit ventilators are considered too loud and too unreliable to use in a school, and it's frowned upon with the MSBA. So we would recommend filling in those in with new brick or other decorative elements, and taking out all of the grills when you take out the unit ventilators. Again, these are the doors to nowhere. There used to be a fire escape here. These are closed off on the other side. Are they covered with drywall, or are they just
No, they're
to bar it over? But it's a big first step coming out of these doors. So we'd recommend, infilling them, or in the case they were sort of the right position when we did the original study for the location for an elevator in the back of the building, they could be used sort of as an opening for the elevator coming into that part of the building. The windows are in pretty good shape by and large. They were replaced 10 years ago, something like that.
Early, like 2004.
No, almost 20 years ago. Aluminum, and it's still in pretty good shape. The windows that are unfortunately in decay are the ones that were remaining in wood. These decorative round windows in the open crowns they have on the outside of the building, right here at the doorway. And those would have to be replaced, but by and large, the windows could remain. It may be suitable to replace them as part of an ongoing renovation of the school, especially since if we're getting into the new stretch code, typically windows in the new stretch code need to be triple glazed. It's difficult to meet the 0.25 U value for this new stretch code with double glazed windows anymore. And when these windows are almost 20 years old, I'm sure that their U value for the whole window is probably much less than that. So in the point, if you were reusing the building, you would probably want to replace the windows, even though they are still in pretty good condition. They do have issues with, and why am I getting this mic? There it goes. We do have conditions where around the building, the windows have leaked. The outside of the windows need to be repointed and re-caulked. You can see here the laminate window sills are delaminating because of water ponding on the windows, and you can see the fiberglass finish on the side is also pulling off because of moisture gathering on the sides and running down the sides of the window. So they do have some leaks, even though they're in fairly good condition, and again, we would recommend under the new energy code, you would need to replace them. The roof, as Rich mentioned, is still in pretty good condition. It is at the end of its useful life. Roofs do sort of get to the end of their useful life when it's going to become more of a pain to patch them constantly and have roof leaks constantly than it would be to maintain them. EPDM roofs are more difficult to maintain than like a tar and gravel roof where you can pour more goop onto the part that's leaking. Here you have a much more difficult time repatching an EPDM roof, and we would recommend replacing the roof as any work that's going on in the building. Interior building elements, as I mentioned before, the corridor doors are too narrow for handicap accessibility. These are only 32 inches wide, and so you don't have the required 30-inch clearance that are required for a wheelchair to get through. Classroom doors also, in the last renovation, were recessed into these pockets As you may or may not know, handicap accessibility requires you to have 18 inches on the pull side of a door and 12 inches on the push side of a door for clearance for the wheelchair to approach and pull the door open. The doors that are mostly in this kind of a condition would have to either have the wall rebuilt or you change the door. And so as a renovation project in this building, if you were replacing the walls that are in the existing classrooms, some of which are pretty thin, they look like the studs on their sides rather than studs on their long dimension, you'd also be replacing all these doors anyway, but just as a point of fact, the doors are not handicap compliant. And then the bathrooms, this door is also not handicap compliant, as are none of the stalls in any of the bathrooms. As you can see, there's a ramp up here going into this bathroom that, I'm not sure how that happened with settlement or something, but there's about a 3-inch difference between this landing of the stair and this area of the floor of the bathroom on the 3rd floor. So this would have to be investigated in a more detailed way to be able to tell what we have to do in that condition to fix that. It might even go away because that could be a wall. Oops, I keep hitting that button. And then, of course, again, the stairs are actually fairly nice as stairs go. They have nice dual posts and railings. The railings are not high enough to serve as a guard on the inside round of the stair, and they don't provide the right accessibility for handrails being continuous. As you can see, the railings sort of run up and then stop at the underside of the stair, and that's running into a typical newel post. Newel posts don't meet the ability for a handrail to run continuously, so someone who's helping themselves up the stair on the handrail can pull themselves along continuously. So we'd have to add a handrail on that both to get a guard and to get accessibility up the stair. But the stairs by and large are in very good condition. They have sort of terrazzo treads, which is unusual to see. I'm intrigued to understand whether or not there are terrazzo floors on some of the rugs.
All the hallways.
Yeah, and a very, very, very durable system of flooring. Basically concrete with decorative chips in it that's ground to a polish, and very common in older schools and not so common these days. But it is a highly durable floor system, and if it can be retained, you're all the better off for it. And that's it for architecture. Any questions so far? Any comments? Anybody been in the school and want to ask something specific about an area of the school before I hop off? Okay. So HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection were reviewed by NV5, our other engineer on the project. So I'm not sure if it's Chris speaking.
This is Chris is here.
Hi, Chris. So if you want to give a brief overview of the existing conditions and recommendations, I'll scroll through the pages for you, if you can see the pages on your screen.
Yep, that's the boilers, which are some of the newer equipment in the building besides the sprinkler system. Those boilers were installed in 1996, so they are, 25 years old. So they're approaching their life expectancy. As you can scroll down a little, Joe. Those are the classroom unit ventilators. They are, like Joe said, they are not used anymore. It was quite popular in schools at one time because you brought all your ventilation, your heating in through one unit, one per classroom. And then sometimes they had, to the right, there's an exhaust ventilator. So you'd bring in the air through the unit ventilator intake and then it's exhausted out, once passed through for each classroom. They are pneumatic controls, which there aren't many control companies that can work on pneumatics anymore, and those have been not used for a very long time. Scrolling down, Joe, there are a number of air handlers in there. There are some that serve the gymnasium. There are ones that do the basement area. Again, these are more appropriate for school use, which it was for many, many years. Less appropriate for a lot of other uses that Joe has mentioned, such as business use. They're really not appropriate. They're more of a school system. There is no air conditioning in the school at all. It's just heating and ventilation, which again presents challenges for other uses. You know, most schools today are fully air conditioned. Scrolling down, Joe, there are some, you know, the roof has a number of smaller exhaust fans that are serving toilets and other general use in the building. Controls, as you scroll down, there's a little bit, that's,
But I would certainly think, Chris, that if this was used as some business use, whether it's collegiate or town use for a different department, that the year-round use would dictate that air conditioning would be
Right.
necessary in the summer.
so really, the limitation on that is the power. You need the service that, you know, if we could jump down, but I just want to get into, that's really the limitation on this building for development, is the amount of power that's currently being brought in. There's only 400 amps, which is coming off an overhead street pole to the building. I would think a building this use would probably have a service of 1,600 to 2,000 amps at the 208 to provide full conditioning in the building. So it's woefully undersized on the electrical side, and that would have to be, certainly be upgraded, working with the utilities.
And certainly, as you mentioned here, Chris, that if it was used for any public function, I would assume that would need an emergency generator, which is not there now.
Right, correct. There was no emergency generator. There are emergency battery units in the egress pass. So when there's a loss of power, those will turn on and provide a lighted path. But beyond that, some areas there should have been more emergency lighting, but there is not. So it's very, you know, probably just getting by code wise. You know, the overall lighting system is very old, fluorescent, T8. You know, everything today is LED, which reduces the operating costs of the lighting. They're still in the school. There's different systems in there. There is a fire alarm system has had some upgrades. I think it's relatively new. It doesn't provide full coverage, but I'm sure it was a lot better than it was you know, before it was renovated. So that certainly have to be upgraded and brought up to current codes for any major renovation or reuse.
If I'm not mistaken,
There's still the clock systems in the school. There is some security within the building as far as probably, you know, break-in burglar type of prevention in the school.
Yeah, just to mention, the fire alarm system was sort of retrofit kind of thing. It wasn't very secure. This is actually in a bathroom on the third floor.
Okay.
So it's
Very secure. Yeah.
the small kids can't reach it.
Right.
That's
Coming down to plumbing, there's a major gas service serving the building, so there is that potential to be reused. But again, as Joe mentioned, with the new stretch energy codes, more and more all-electric systems are being utilized. So, you know, we're feeling the pressure as designers to get away from fossil fuels more. And so, you know, the service is there, but we'd have to see how it can incorporate into something if the stretch code would come into play at this project.
Yeah, providing fossil fuels now in buildings with the new energy code is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Very difficult.
In a new building, you can offset that with, you know, large amounts of insulation in the walls or other things to offset that detriment of having the fossil fuels coming in the building rather than an all-electric building. But in an existing building, it's extremely difficult to do if you're trying to retain exterior shell. And the existing building doesn't have really any insulation in the exterior shell, except for what's on the interior finished side of the wall. And that was only done as a renovation in the 70s, where if you were like me alive in the 70s, no one cared about energy in the 70s. So there's not that much in there. So although it's a gas service, I think Chris is right, that may be something that you have to reconsider, upgrading the building to an all-electric service down the road rather than having gas coming into the building.
Right. Yep. There is a main water service that comes in, I think it's about a 2-inch, again, that may be marginal depending on what the use is, down the road. Typically, we'd see a 4-inch or slightly larger service coming into a building of this size.
And that
Domestic
may
hot
be
water.
affected, Chris, if I could just say, depending on whether or not the kitchen's retained, correct? Right now, it does
Yeah,
have, it does
yeah.
have a cafeteria kitchen on the second floor, the first floor above the basement. But if that's not retained in any kind of renovation project that you do, for whatever reason, that may affect the capacity we have to have for water.
Correct.
Like I said, a lot of these things depend on the use that we decide to do. But in the end, I think we're looking at a gut of the building to suitably
Right.
renovate it into some other occupant, yeah. Anyway,
Right.
sorry, Chris.
No, that's a problem, no problem. There's domestic hot water, there's an older, gas-fired boiler, and there's also was recently installed looks like an electric, water heater. I suspect there was issues with providing enough hot water, and that electric heater was installed. The next few bunch of pictures are the kitchen. I don't think we need to, delve into that too much. And as Joe had mentioned, the toilet rooms are, not meeting ADA at all, toilet heights and accessibilities in the stalls, etc. So those would certainly have to be pretty much gutted and redone. And the challenges there is they remain as a bathroom is the glazed tile blocks are very difficult to repipe, and Joe, you've probably experienced having to get rid of those just to upgrade plumbing fixture heights, etc.
Yeah, we would also have to review the quantity of fixtures existing in the school, and we would, depending on the use, different use groups require different rates of fixtures in the building. So a business use might require more than an assembly use, or may require more than an educational use. And so you don't want to have a building that's half bathrooms, half functional space, but you also want to have the right amount of fixtures for what you need to have in the building to serve the population that's going to be there. So part of whatever we come up with in terms of like a short list of different uses for the building, we would look at, again, this is one of the components we'd have to review in terms of space allocation.
Correct. And the last MEP system is the sprinkler system, which was installed in 2007. So it's relatively new compared to everything else in this building. Certainly a sprinkler wet, it's mostly wet except for in the attic space where there's a dry system. It's not heated, but sprinkler is very, very good for having to maintain your asset, where there's a lot of wood frame and et cetera in the building, though there's some concrete, but certainly a sprinkler system is a good thing to have there to at least protect your asset, as well as provide life safety, once the building is occupied.
And in any building of this size, we're at, what are we,
It's 43,000.
yeah, it's 42,000 square feet. You're well over the 7,500 square feet necessary
Oh, well
by
over
code
it,
to require sprinklers in the building. So whatever we do, we'd probably have to expand and modify the sprinkler system, but it is required in the building. It's not something we can lose. A lot of places, the sprinkler system, because it was a retrofit, is exposed. And you obviously want, in a new renovation of the building, you'd want to have it so that those things were concealed behind walls and ceilings, so that you would be able to, have the protection but not have the pipe. Like that.
What's wrong with that?
Sorry, I keep hitting this button.
All right.
It keeps, it's Mike's computer that does that. And recommendations, Chris, for that are to renovate or modify, yeah?
For a sprinkler?
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, if you ended up, whatever the modifications are, as far as partitioning and whatnot, you'd have to, basically you pull back your mains back to the riser and reconfigure based on the new layout. But I think it has, the service is in good condition, it's relatively new, so I don't see a lot of, retrofitting of the main service coming into the building.
Right now, it's a functional system, but it's not very pretty.
Right. Depends on your point of view.
Yeah, well. Whoops. And that's pretty much it for the report. We did include some floor plans just to show the existing conditions of the building. We look forward to any thoughts you might have. Obviously, you might want to read the report, digest the report. We can forward to everybody on the committee, or Mike, you can do that. If you want to take a read through it. Again, if you have any thoughts, suggestions, questions, dreams for the building that you've thought about since you were 14 years old, floor's open. We're welcome to listen to anything you have to say.
Okay, Tim?
I have a question. Is it within your scope to comment about hazardous materials in the building, or would that require a different specialist to give us that report?
We did not have someone go through the building at this review for hazardous materials, but we did have someone go through the building during a 2013 study for hazardous materials.
Okay.
There is hazardous material in the building.
I
All
would
the
suspect there
floor
would be.
tile is asbestos. The ductwork, lining, caulking, and wraps are asbestos. A lot of other parts of the building have been removed. The fire doors in the building, the doors in the corridors, things like that, those all have asbestos cores in them. The good news is that, that stuff is easy to abate. It's the stuff that is concealed in the wall that you never know is behind a piece of casework or something that was for a science lab, cabinet or something. That's all the stuff that just pops up at you that you don't know about. Stuff behind clocks and things, but the stuff we know about from what was done in the error reports that were maintained by the town, because every 3 years the town would have to do an asbestos, management report of any school building, and so we utilized that plus our engineer that went through the building to look at it. So there are things that aren't, don't have that, like the boilers and stuff like that, but there are some things that do have it that have to be abated.
Was the insulation looked at as well?
Insulation where?
Like, just everywhere?
Duct insulation was reviewed, yes, but the insulation, we didn't cut into the walls. Like I said, there is no insulation in the cavity between the brick veneer and the block backup. We didn't do any selective demolition to open up other walls in the building. Pipe insulation was reviewed, and that typically in a building of this age would have asbestos, but it doesn't. As I said, the ductwork sealant specifically and the ductwork insulation was noted as having asbestos. And that is included in our 2013 report, if you want to forward that too.
Yeah, I think you all had a link to that in
Yeah,
the.
so, and that gives a list of all the different sampling that was done in the building. There's like 2 pages of samples that were done, and what the different compositions of each one of those were, whether there was no asbestos detected or whether there was.
And Mike, I'm assuming we're probably dealing with lead paint in this building, given the age also?
Yes, and we did some lead remediation on the walls and the ceiling up in the library when we repainted it. Not that long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, right before COVID. But yeah, if they just painted over the walls in the 70s, there would be lead paint under them at some point. They did do, in the 70s, they actually did a lot of, an interesting point in that was they actually took out the classroom walls and had moved them, and then some years later, moved them again. But they're not structural, they're not holding up the building. The corridor walls are holding up the building, so they messed with some of the size of the classrooms and changed them, and then at a later date changed them back for whatever reason. So there's been a history of, it's changed. Its biggest change was a change from a high school, which would have been in the 60s, when they moved, because when it was Franklin High School moved into a new high school, which was the Horace Mann building, which was opened in '62, and then they immediately, the enrollment was going off the charts, and they hadn't been in there for very long when they started construction on the building we just tore down back in '14. They had built that building, and they turned Horace Mann into just a 100,000 square foot middle school. But in '04, we went into Horace Mann and with an MSBA project, added 100,000 square feet, Oak Street Elementary School, ECDC, and then, in '14, we tore down the high school that was built and opened in '70, '71. So that's kind of so there were things done at different points in time that changed things. Probably some of the bigger things were done right after it changed from a high school, and that was the high school basketball court. It had bleachers going much, much farther up. I don't know if it had a cafeteria at all at that point, but there were some major changes at that point. And then the '70s were minor changes, and it really became Davis Thayer Elementary School in a couple different fashions.
I think to summarize your question, or answer your question, is that, yes, we do anticipate that there's lead paint in the building. It has gone through a number of different renovations that have deleted some of the lead paint, or covered the lead paint. But we would expect that in a gut renovation that almost all of the interior partitions would be removed anyway. And so the remaining lead paint would be limited and it could be dealt with.
And it sounded like, Madam Chair, it's okay to continue. It sounded like from your report that there are some suggested uses given the existing structural framework and condition of the building.
Yeah.
And then there's additional uses that could be thought of by this group, but they would take some massive amounts of restructuring and steel support. I heard mentioned many times, like
structural reinforcement to provide lateral stability for seismic earthquake loads.
So at some point, if, in the process of these meetings, it would be great if we could talk about, I guess, the difference, right? Because there's going to be a huge amount of money difference between trying to utilize the existing structure versus basically gutting it and putting all new steel framing and making it something else, right? Because those, to me, if I'm hearing it right, those are like two very different paths and probably very different dollar signs.
Yeah,
right?
the gutting would be primarily for, as Mike said, non-load bearing structure. So you have the perimeter of the school, the outside wall, that's load bearing masonry, and then you have an interior corridor that's also load bearing. But everything else is not. And so, in the interior finish of the exterior wall is not. So you would anticipate that the non-load bearing stuff would be removed. You could remove some of the structural stuff too if you had to, but you have to structure the building to suit it. But then if you were going to use the category 3 or category 4 risk factor in use in that building, you would have to put new additional structure to the building to stabilize that load bearing masonry that doesn't really have the reinforcement in it that it would need to.
Because I know there's many people watching that have, many people in the audience actually, that have suggested this building possibly be our new police station. And it sounds like from your comments that that might be a difficult path because of the structural
police station,
challenges.
depending on the, we have to see the program for the police station. But the area in the building the building is a very small footprint. And so managing the things you have to have on the first floor of the building, the detention area, public access, those sort of things, is very difficult. You also need to have a sally port, which would be when the police car comes in, it's a secure garage that it pulls into, that it can disembark prisoners to bring in, detainees to bring in, to be processed for being held in the cell. And there's no place to do that right now on the site. And because the grade of the first floor of the building is higher than the exterior grade, and there really isn't a lot of room around the building, especially in the back before you get to playground spaces and parking spaces, that to raise the grade to get up to that level, getting people into the building, it's all right. Don't need it. Getting people into the building from Sallyport is difficult. I've done that once before. In 2006 or 7, I did a police station in Cambridge, and that was a reuse of an existing business building, commercial building. And that when we pulled into a loading dock, the existing loading dock, and that became our Sallyport. But getting prisoners up the loading dock and into the building, especially handicapped prisoners, was very difficult. And that's the one thing that the police department regrets doing, is because you don't have that easy delivery of disembarking prisoners into the building. And so it's not just the allocation of space within the building that makes it, I've done like 5 or 6 police stations, but not just the allocation of the program within the building on the first floor. It's the being able to get people into the building and out of the building safely and securely that's difficult on this site. One thing you don't want to do is have a big garage in the front of your building. The Sallyport will be in the back of the building. This isn't a lot of space between the back of the building and the playground.
Yeah, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Obviously, that's for further discussion. I just wanted to hear some clarification, because there were a lot of mention in the comments about, I think, that Category 3 and Category 4. So just wanted people to understand what that was about.
Category 4 use, the police station is a Category 4 use.
Okay, thank you very much.
Greg?
I actually just have a question for Jamie. Actually, a couple quick questions. Do you have a current value of the building itself and then the property and the value itself together,
Yeah.
by any chance?
Through you, Madam Chair, so the property card online is approximately about $3.5 million. I could look it up quick to see the split. That includes the land and the building.
Yep.
Just note that that was appraised as a school. So one of the options for the committee in the charge, you know, if we make it that far, is to get a modern day, you know, property appraisal of the building structure without the designation of a school, just to see if that changes what the appraisal would be. And it would obviously be done under we'd have to do the appraisal under current zoning, right?
And what, just so, I mean, I pretty much know, what was the size of the lot itself, so everybody knows?
3.4 acres.
There's been conversation about breaking it up into 2, that's why I'm asking the question.
And it's
Utilize the front and the back and whatnot, so.
and it's just about half and half.
Yeah.
When you split it, when you talk about the ball fields, the parking strip up near school,
2 different
and,
uses
yeah.
potentially.
Not exactly, but it's 3.5 acres, split those in half, so you're probably at about 1.75 acres for the building side with the asphalt, the front lawn out to the gates, and then probably 1.75 acres of just the ball field in the back with the playground.
To the Kissel group, what do you think your estimated cost, and I don't want to nail you down, for a total gut of this building as we speak right now today? Today's mark? Any
No-
kind of number?
no clue.
Square foot?
No clue. No. I will say that costs have jumped significantly in the past 3 years. As an example, I did Attleboro High School, and that, when it was put out to bid 3-4 years ago, was $450. Hope I'm speaking out of turn here. $500 a square foot. Neshoba High School, which we're working on right now, in schematic design, is estimated at about $1,000 a square foot.
I just
So,
want people to hear, because I know that, I know the numbers.
yeah, and the police station, just as the police stations we're seeing are also coming in around $750, $800 a square foot.
And I did, I'm familiar because I did the old Lincoln Town Hall over, total gut rehab approximately 6-7 years ago, and the numbers weren't cheap. So I just want people to hear that it's
You know,
not cheap to do this.
Renovations are always tricky, because you never know what you're gonna find. You have to have a large contingency to make sure you can cover yourself if something comes up that you just don't know about.
Correct.
And you
I would
said
just-
750, not 750, right?
What's that?
750?
750, yeah.
To clarify, that's to gut and rehab, or just gut?
No. What I'm saying is that when we're designing new police stations right now,
Yeah.
They're coming in about 750, 800.
Right, but to Greg's question, I believe he asked what was the gut.
I have no idea.
He doesn't have.
He doesn't
Right.
know. I have no idea.
Just
Okay.
for my own.
Yeah, no idea.
Just trying to-
I would just add that the threshold that I mentioned for the cost trigger for accessibility compliance is, by my calculation, $828,000. And that is at 30% of the assessed value of just the building on site. Doesn't include the building and the lot, it's just the building, according to the way the law is. And I had the assessed value of the structure at $2.76 million currently.
He's 100% accurate. I just looked up the property card. The appraisers, the staff just went out earlier this year. 2.76 million is the building value. 1.78 million is the land value, for a total of 4.5 million is the estimated that's the appraised value. Again, and just checking the property card real quick, they still had it classified under education.
Good, thank you. I just,
Yep.
just to let people
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's not cheap.
Not at all.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Quick question. You mentioned the green stretch code. Is that applicable to only public use, public-owned buildings, or is that any reuse, private or public?
It's a building code, so it's applicable to any building that's built in the state. And right now, with the new stretch code, it's applicable to renovation projects also.
Great.
As of buildings permitted after July 1.
Right.
Since Franklin is already a green community, they're automatically turned over into the new stretch code that came out a few weeks ago.
What are the clear heights interior on the floors?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, in the assembly spaces, it's a lot. I could look it up, I have it in the report somewhere. Classrooms are typically, because they have an acoustical ceiling in them, I don't know what the height is to the next level, because there's other stuff going on, and when the ceilings were added, but the ceilings were added below the window head height, right?
Correct.
So, I could get you the information if you wanted, I have it in a report somewhere.
I think the ceilings are though in at like 9 feet.
Yeah,
And then you have,
yeah,
you know,
quite a bit of space.
quite a bit of space.
12
It's
to
a
15.
typical school building that would have been built at that time with absurdly high
Yeah,
ceilings and classrooms.
Yeah.
And then everybody started pushing them down, changing the lighting.
yeah.
Because back then, I mean, all the schools had just so much, and they were paying fortunes to heat them. They had lights that were so far from the kids.
And when we talk about the gymnasium space and the library space, does the rest of the steel structure or the floor structure support expanding over to eliminate that clear height if there was usually to get a full second floor? Or is that not possible?
You mean, could you infill it with a floor in between those spaces?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna speak for Rich, my structural engineer. There may be other structure that has to happen to reinforce the exterior columns or walls or whatnot. But I'm not sure why there'd be a reason why you couldn't infill those spaces.
Great. No more questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
So, you said that the corridor walls are load bearing. Is it load bearing on both sides of the corridor or just one side?
No,
Like,
it's
you
just,
need to
it's
keep
just the
corridor,
interior,
or
it's just
what-
the interior side.
Okay,
So, you've got the perimeter wall,
yeah.
and then you've got a donut going around basically where the cafeteria and the library are,
Mhm.
right, in the center of the building. And then outside of that is the corridor, that is a ring corridor,
Yeah.
and then outside of that is the classrooms. There aren't really any interior classrooms, the classrooms are all on the perimeter. And then the interior spaces are for either, bathrooms, the library, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, that sort of thing occupy that center part inside the other bearing walls.
And then, the roof, would you anticipate that there'd be any additional capacity if the use changes and you need to put rooftop units on there? Or would it need to be wildly reinforced?
Because it's a wood framed, I would assume they'd have to be restructured. Rich, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, there's no excess capacity in the roof. We'd have to add steel,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
And, I mean, where you don't have a mansard or anything on the upper roof, putting a big 12-foot high RTU in the roof would be pretty Pretty homely.
But it's, you know, if you go in and do something, you put it on the roof or you put it on the ground, so it's gonna be ugly somewhere.
Right,
So-
you know, but, you can put a cooling tower on the ground and enclose it with a fence,
Yeah.
in the back or something, and we'd have to look at that. That's something we haven't really explored that much. But having it on the roof was something we weren't really considering because of the extensive cost of restructuring the roof.
That's all.
One final question. I know it's on the Massachusetts Registry of Historic Buildings. Does that impact the interior at all, or just the exterior?
I was unaware that it was on the historic building register. When we did our original study,
Is it not on there?
I don't
It
think
comes
it
up on
is.
the macro survey, is it not?
I think it's part of the district. Not
It's
part
in the
of-
district, but I don't
the
believe.
building itself isn't?
Is
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean much either, does it? Yeah.
Not really.
Okay, great.
I have a question. Could a third floor be added to this building?
There is a third floor now.
Well, no, you're counting the bottom. Could we add another floor, let me put it that way?
Where the roof is?
Yes.
Instead of the roof? That's some structural analysis that I'm not sure we've done. Rich, would you?
I'd say no, but I think at the beginning of this meeting, you said if you throw enough money at something, you can get it done.
I think that that's a question that might be asked by someone who's interested in purchasing it or renting it or redoing the whole thing. So that's why I asked that question.
We'd have to explore issues with the
I would think
zoning,
no.
not just structurally, but issues with the zoning.
Right.
And based on the use group that would be put in the building, there are limitations in the code for height that you can build. And we'd have to look at that, particularly for that building. Once we get to a little more definition of where we are with a use for the building, we can answer those questions. But again, like you said, you can throw as much money as you want, and it can happen. It would be very difficult to do that sensitively to the building's appearance, I would say.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. From the committee? Go right ahead.
Do you have, or I guess, like, it seems like you've seen a lot of projects across the Commonwealth. Like, does this remind you of, are there any like projects, like building similar spaces that you've come across, and what was the final result of that?
I honestly haven't done a renovation like this before.
Okay.
Most of the buildings that I've done are new buildings. I mentioned Cambridge Police was a renovation of an existing building, but honestly, it wasn't nearly as appealing visually as this building is. So, although we were sensitive to the exterior of that building for the neighborhood, it wasn't a sensitive building in the neighborhood it was in to start with. But I've not done a renovation of this type before, and I couldn't answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were working with MSBA and you were doing a study of renovating this building, they'd probably tell you to tear it down because it would just be astronomically,
Right.
so much money.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if there's other towns that have old high schools, what was their path forward, and if you had come across any examples of that?
No, I don't know if you guys have done that in Connecticut. We typically don't do a lot of rehab for housing or something like that. A lot of old high schools like this have been renovated into apartments, condominiums, especially larger ones in those sorts of spaces.
Municipal uses, town halls or
Yeah.
annex buildings or community centers or things of that nature.
Your office building, for example, KBA.
In Foxborough,
In Foxborough, yeah, we didn't do that though.
there's an old hospital
Yeah.
Okay.
office, it's an office building.
Generally, Mike is correct. When we do schools, we have to do an analysis of a renovation addition, and a new building concept, and we have to estimate all three. And typically, the new building concept is the cheapest. Build new, rip down the old. I just finished a renovation of an addition to a school in Foxborough where we chose to do renovation addition rather than ripping down, making a new building. And that worked out really well, But we, as a firm, don't really get involved in doing housing, where we focus mostly on municipal buildings in what we do.
And the Foxborough one went from an old school to another school. The example you just listed?
No, the Burrell School went from being a school to continuing as the Burrell School.
Right, okay.
It was renovated, the existing school was renovated, and we added on to it.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
A question
Go
that I
right
forgot to
ahead.
ask previously. Do you anticipate, as part of your work, once we start developing ideas of doing test fits for different concepts, or is that sort of beyond your scope of what you're engaged in?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, currently that's beyond our scope, because when we got signed up earlier, we were just trying to analyze what we all have to work with. So, to date, we're in the process with that, but we want to listen to you and come up with some pros and cons of different ideas, and kind of get to a short list of preferred uses, you know. But that's where we are currently signed up for. Anything beyond that, doing test fits or different concepts, we'd love to continue on. That's not what we're signed up for right now.
Jamie, go right ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That was a perfect segue. I mean, that, I think is, you know, we've got the existing conditions up here. I mean, we'll get the final report out. And really, the next step is really hearing from all of you, what the community has said, what you've heard, what not, to give a short list of ideas for them to basically pontificate around what, within the structural analysis, what is possible. And then, obviously, the elephant in the room at that point is what, you know, with those different models, if it's a community center, or if it's affordable housing, or this, then I think we get to the next level of the onion, which is what is that going to cost? You know, in ballpark numbers. Just a reminder, everybody, I mean, at some point, a public procurement has to go out on this. We can't just like do something, you know, generally on the side. We have to put out, I think it's something to bid somewhere. We'd have to go through and talk to the town attorney on that. But still, I think over the last several years, there's been a lot of conversation in the community, and I think I'm sure all of you have some ideas or some hopes of what it could be. You've just heard some of the liabilities of the building, plus some of the strengths of the building. We're obviously not going to solve it all tonight, but I think we want, while they're here, to get kind of a short list of ideas the committee would like them to look into and explore a little further, just so that we can kind of move the ball down the field to be able to try to get to answer those tougher questions, which I think everyone's going to ask them is, well, how much is it going to cost to renovate it for this, right? There's a lot of what ifs in that, but as you can see, they've already done a tremendous amount of work already to get to a foundational estimate of what that might be. But I think we need to know, you know, what's on the committee's minds and what's on folks' minds to look into.
Thank you, Jim.
So,
I'd like to go to the audience now, if you have any questions. Mr. Ciccone,
Thank you.
state your name and address.
Rick Ciccone, Chestnut Street. It sounds like, if I may, through you, Madam Chairman, if I may, first of all, this group should be inside that school. We have been told for the last year that we were going to be allowed to go inside our old school. Have you, Madam Chairman, or any of the council been inside?
Inside the school.
Were we going to have a walkthrough? Shouldn't this
It was
body
mentioned.
have a walkthrough? Shouldn't they know what we're talking about here, other than just words from gentlemen's mouths? Secondly, I'm obviously one of the big proponents, and will continue to be, and have lots and lots of seniors behind me, I can assure you, that this should be our police station, that we should, for all God's sake, we should save that building. It's going to be 100 years old next year. That isn't, and if you look at how that building is located, it's dead center in our community. Dead center. You have the 2 495s, easily accessible. You have response time. You have size. The gentleman speaks of a sally port. We could build a sally port off the back of that school. I'm not gonna say easily, because everything's gonna take money. But as we know, this community is gonna spend 30 million, we've already talked about. And as we know, going forward, this 30 million will probably turn into 42 by the time we build our new police station. So, what we should be doing, in one humble man's opinion, is reinforcing that school from the inside with steel, and make sure the roof's safe, and make sure this is gonna be the state-of-the-art police station for this community going forward. But it's doable. It was done with the black box in the center of town when it was 4 walls in 1988, and a second floor was put on, and steel, was built steel inside, and after it's gutted, you can have anything you want inside. The ball field that we talk about, excuse me, I apologize. The ball fields we talk about, that little ball field that's behind there doesn't have to stay there. We now have Schmidt's Farm. We'll build a bigger ball field. We'll build 2 ball fields. We'll build 3. But when it comes time for the importance of a new police station, we're gonna spend 30 million. That has already a building in place, infrastructure in place. We can update the electrical system. We can update the plumbings. We can do anything we want with that facility because it's in place. It's the entrance to our community. It's just like our senior center is. It should be just as important as our senior center is going forward. That building needs to be the police station, and whatever it takes to make that happen, even though we're gonna have gentlemen here who are hired by the community, may not think it's a great idea, I, for one, and many like me, think it's gonna be doable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Saccone. Mr. Sumerian.
Yes. Thank you for the extensive report, very enlightening. My name is Wayne Sumerian. I'm chairman of the Recreation Advisory Board in Franklin. Also a coach of over 50 years of numerous sports and still coaching. First of all, to mention what Mr. Saccone said, as far as the police station, location is very, very important. Every town I seem to go to has a police station on the main thoroughfare. I've heard talk of a police station being moved to Parmenter. You'd have police cars speeding down Wachusett Street, not a very good situation. It's an ideal location. Also, have we done any study regarding the next 5 to 10 to 15 years on school population? I have a figure which was on the town website today. To convert Davis Thayer to a school, $28,849,650. That's a hell of a good price for a school with today's prices. So I think we have to look into that. You know, what are population projections in the coming years? I've heard talk of closing Parmenter. Well, I've heard of housing. Parmenter would be ideal for housing. It's 1 floor. They have an auditorium, a kitchen, and plenty of space for our seniors. So those are some options. Convert it to a school if needed for a very reasonable price. Police station, we've got to do something about that. It's very outdated, very overcrowded, and very out of the main thoroughfare. You have to give people directions to get to our police station, which I think is ridiculous. That's my presentation. I thank you for hearing me. As I said, I've been around a while. I was the last graduating class from Franklin High School, which is now Davis Thayer. Any questions for me?
Well, thank you.
Do you think I'm funny? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do the right thing.
Anyone else in the audience? for these gentlemen, correct?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I mean, I guess I would just say, are there any ideas that any of the committee members have? Otherwise, you're gonna leave it to me to pick the future uses. Because we have to, I mean, I think we've got the police station. I think we've heard that loud and clear.
Right.
Any other ideas people have? I mean, I'm just,
Yeah, I have one last comment.
Uh,
I want to commend the fact that we are not going to turn it over to Dean. And I'm a Dean grad myself. It should remain in the town's control. Thank you.
If you want to have another meeting at some point, or think about this, and read the, we'll get this report out to you, the draft version that you saw pictures and stuff of tonight, and then have another meeting at some time in the future and talk out a list. That would probably be, because you've just got a lot, we just threw an awful lot at you to digest tonight, and
Certainly did.
going home and, thinking about it and reading this report, we can have Julie send a link to it somewhere tomorrow, and then you can go through that, and then you could have a, get together again with another meeting and talk out some things and make a list, and we could forward it to Castle Booze, and, you could talk out and figure out what you really want.
We're already talking about.
yeah, hold,
What?
all right, I'll answer the question about the school. So, yes, we are gonna do open houses in the school. Unfortunately, I've showed all of you photos. We've tried to work with some moving companies to try to find out how to minimize the financial impact to move stuff around. But at the current time, we cannot just walk into the school without it being a pretty big liability. So we've been trying to get quotes from some moving companies. We have the financing, thank you to the council. And the idea would be is that you'd meet again. If you don't want to meet on the agenda in August, we can skip that. But the idea is, it's going to be very challenging to get people in the building to do what they want to do. Because remember, there's not just a current needs tour of the building, but a lot of folks in town want to go back into the building for a nostalgic view of the building for old memories. So there's multiple goals here on going into the building. We have not been able to schedule that. We've barely been able to get the committee appointed. So with all due respect to Mr. Ciccone, yes, that commitment is still there, it is still live. I wish I could do it tomorrow, but I can't do it tomorrow. I would anticipate probably sometime in later September or October, and we'd probably have a couple of them, one on a weekday, one on a weekend, like we've traditionally done with stuff like this, so that make sure that everybody has fair access to be able to do the tour through the building.
So you're
that is still a plan to do that, but we've got to be able to at least get a lot of the stuff that was left in the middle of the halls and stuff put into corners, so people can go in the rooms and whatever they want to look at, they can look at, just so we don't have people trip and fall. We can't be moving stuff out because there's no elevator. We can't have people carrying things from the third floor down to the first. Stuff like that. That for those of you who have been to Gwenna's question earlier about other projects, that is what happens. People then go into the building, they steal things, and don't worry, they can take whatever they want. It's cheaper for us. But you cannot just have people running down the stairs, with chairs and things. So we have to be a little just cautious and make sure we do it correctly. But we will be going into the building at some point, and we will schedule this committee to go to inside the building as well.
Okay, would we be going into with the
Yes.
committee before our next meeting?
No.
No. So what you're
If you
talking-
want to wait to have another meeting until we can go in the building, I am more than comfortable with that.
Well, you put down here our next meeting for August 15th.
That was just to kind of,
Right,
so people
right.
can plan ahead a little bit.
Well, I think August, go ahead.
Yeah, everybody's got their hands up now.
Okay.
Because they all want to go in the building.
Date?
No.
Okay, go right ahead.
I have two quick questions to clarify. The floor plans that were shown, is it possible to get a floor plan that depicts just the bones? So we know what it is if it's peeled back, what the floor plate is that we're looking for? I mean, Sam asked about the corridors, because I think it sounds like we're gonna go to the walls is possibly the most realistic option for any future use. Is it possible to get a floor plan that shows what that is with sizes to kind of understand what the estimates would be for a user?
They're not really hired for that for something like that as of yet. I mean, if you're looking, I think the first step would be to come up with a list of things, possibilities that they could go through. This study does have the floor plans of the existing building that we're gonna send you tomorrow.
Okay. Does it call out the load-bearing walls in those plans?
Probably not.
Okay.
No, it's information we got from PDFs of the work that was done in the 1970s.
Mhm.
We can go into the PDF and just erase walls. That's not hard to do. We can do that.
It might be helpful for some
it's
just to
just
see a
masking
plan
the
that's
walls, yeah.
clean, as opposed to the demising school, which isn't really the use. And
I'll say this, I can do that. That's, even me, who lacks every computer skill you can probably think of, I can do that.
Even if you could just sharpie the X on the wall, that's fine. The last question, hopefully without being too inflammatory, just for my own edification. We are the Davis Thayer Reuse Committee. Does that preclude us from scraping the site,
What do you mean by that?
knocking the building down?
Raising.
No.
Okay,
You
so
can-
the site
The
is
committee,
reuse,
yeah.
not the building itself.
It is,
Okay.
absolutely, that's not inflammatory. I think a lot of people out there listening, some people want that, right? I think there's a lot of different views in the community on the building, the facade, the gut job, the roof, fourth floor, all challenges, right? Even knocking the building down probably comes with its own challenges, right?
Sure.
So, but that is certainly within the purview of the committee, yep.
I know we've had a chance to hear from a few residents tonight. Is there going to be another opportunity to get community input to some of these ideas?
At any of the meetings, they will
Okay,
be able
so-
to speak, absolutely, yes.
So, Chair, for you, a question for Jamie. So if we sold the building, we could require them to keep the outside the same, like we did with the meeting house?
Yep. Through you, Madam Chair, number one, to Megan's question, yes, if the committee wants to have a public hearing of sorts, for lack of a better term, you can open it up, people can come in. You could do it now. It's probably best after people have something to react to.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, wow, that's what it's gonna be, or it's gonna get leveled or something. And Patrick, your question?
Require that they keep the outside of the building the same if we sold it.
You can, the community can, the committee and/or the council, they can decide to preserve the facade, just like the old South Church. I think just like the church, there's a couple hang-ups on that. One, the preservation restriction is extremely difficult to get done, as we're learning about with the church, because you gotta go through the state to get an approved historic preservation restriction. And that may, to some degree, devalue what interest is in the building. And you can certainly put any conditions on it, Councilor Sheridan, like that you want, during any RFP or any expression of interest or any public bid. More than happy to do that. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is there any possibility of, in an effort to relieve the financial burden on the town from what is, I would consider currently a liability, as this is a building that is costing money and not making the town money, is there any ability to have public-private partnerships or to lease the building? Are those options?
Yep. Through you, Madam Chair, those are all options. I just want to point out, the cost to maintain that right now is about $100,000 a year. So I know that sounds like a lot, but really in the big picture of the town budget, that's as Jeff Nutting would have said, right, that's stamp money. To preserve that asset at that amount is really not very expensive. I think it's more critical that the community makes the right decision about what the vision is for the future. It's not too troublesome per se to have that. I know it's still a lot of money, but for a $4.6 million appraisal, it's not too bad.
But there would be the opportunity to,
You
like,
could
for
lease
the
it.
town to maintain control of the building while putting the burden of renovations and stuff on somebody else,
I
whether
would-
through a lease or through some sort of public-private partner.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is absolutely accurate. We could lease it out. Just keep in mind, all those liabilities on the building have to be accommodated for depending on the use, right? So if you're students, right, kids, I'm just, just for context, now we're back to ADA accessibility in a building that probably is not suitable. People, I think, forget a lot, they're listening at home. Davis Thayer closed, certainly the enrollment problem was a problem and still is a huge issue in this community. But the real reason that was discussed at those meetings was because whether it was an adequate facility for modern day education for kids. That was really the nexus of it. I think that might have gotten lost in a little bit of the white noise. But we could lease it out, the council could lease out the building, but with that comes some contingencies. Obviously with ADA or some of the mechanicals or what then the cost would be to the town, the landlord, to then upgrade it if there's an issue. And then who to lease it to is a public process. You kind of have to go through possibly a highest bidder kind of process on that. And so the lease almost comes with just as many challenges possibly, as making a final decision. But absolutely, the parking lot, the field, any part of that parcel, right? Any part of the 4.5 acres could be leased out, through a competitive process.
Through you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. First of all, thank you to Castle Booze. You've been partners with us for many, many years, and your work is quality, and I thank you for bringing that. But I, too, would like to see the report at some point, when it's reasonable for you to do that. Secondly, I think that when emotions get high and people have various different opinions, we were told to come here with an open mind. I, for one, have done that. I have my own opinions, but I'm willing to listen and see what everybody has to say. I recently, in another area of my life, went through something similar to this where there were a lot of different opinions, and what was very helpful was to gather people together and have these opinions stated so that we could get a sense of what was on people's minds so that they feel like they're participating in the discussion of the project. The other thing I want to say is that for the dignity of that school and the importance and the respect that it brings to all of you who have been there, and others that aren't here that have, we have to do this thoughtfully. There's no process and reason to rush it. To Jamie's point, you don't want to walk in there to see something that's quite frankly disturbing. You want to make sure that the building is in a presentable form before we go through so that people can see it and take from it what they want or look at it in whatever light that they want. And then we have to think about what is on everybody's mind. So it kind of concerns me when there are some things said that it's got to be this, but it can never be that. That's not what we're here for. We're here to look at all options and to try to figure out what is the best reuse of this building. And I know that that comes with a lot of sentimentality. I felt the same way, when the high school that I graduated in is no longer. We all have those things. But times go on, and we have to try to figure for the future. And I thought that's what we were here to do on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. That's exactly what we're here for. I don't know if it's a good idea, and Jamie, you direct me, to ask the members tonight if they have ideas of what they would like to see the school used for, or if it's too soon to do that. But since they're here tonight, it would be able to let them know the avenue that we're heading in. I don't know if it's too soon.
I don't either. I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could drive this one like every other project, but this one comes with a lot of objectivity and subjectivity from different people. And so I think, I guess I've just heard so much about this building, I guess I can't fathom the idea that somebody wouldn't have an idea or two. But also, this is a lot. It is, to Roberta's point, an emotional issue for a lot of people. And to Mike's credit earlier, if people want to take a month to digest it, if everybody's comfortable with the August 15th meeting, let this percolate for a few weeks, come back, in I guess almost a month will be the second meeting. And then I do anticipate those couple tours. I do anticipate a larger gathering of a hearing later in the fall, and hopefully, meeting maybe once a month for the next 5-6 months. We'll be able to get to a good place. And the committee doesn't also, to Chris's point earlier, it's not like you have to send the council a report and say, do this. you know, I'm likely envisioning a menu of choices with some factual information from some experts who do our business as their business, and they've been doing a phenomenal job for a long time. You know, I expect at some point they would contribute, say, here are 5 choices, and here are the pros and cons, the costs, the liabilities to some of those choices, right? I think what the council needs, Council Berger, as you know, is probably not 25 choices, right?
Right.
Or every idea percolating out there. I think we have to whittle it down to a handful. And if there's a lease option out there or some other option, I think we keep those options open as well, because I think, as many people have said, you know, the town is paying money. Maybe there is a little way to use some of the parking, you know, but those come with cons too, because then there's less parking for Little League teams. So there's also always pros and cons, right? So you can wait a month, and if people want to marinate on it a little bit, that's fine too.
I think waiting a month. And would you be available in August 15th? Such a popular guy, huh?
Yes, he is.
Yes, I would be.
He's very popular.
Yeah. I would be available.
Okay. Why don't we leave it with that then? And then we can all think of what we would like to offer.
Have them look a little deeper into it, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, one last question.
Sure.
There is a committee for the police location building?
Yes.
And what's the timing on that? Like, what?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, so we're hoping to have their first committee hearing in late August. I think today we finally got a date. That a police station building committee ends up becoming its own, a whole separate entity once we hire a project manager for that. It's the state law procurement, any project over $1.5 million requires it's called an OPM. And we're nowhere near that. I think we're probably still like 6 to 12.
We're a ways away from.
Yeah, we're a ways away from an OPM, but they'll be having a couple committee meetings late this summer and then in the fall, just to get the committee together, organize, and develop a timeline for that project. But that, you know, a station like that, if you have a site still, you're talking, you know, probably end of the decade, because people have to also inject in the idea of, to pay for this, almost any one of these projects, the police station or a municipally renovated Davis Thayer, is 99.4% sure that you'll have to go to the ballot for a debt exclusion financing. You know, so you're gonna have to go to the voters to authorize the building, just like the town did 10 years ago for the high school, right? And so you build that into the model as well, because eventually you're gonna have to probably get a ballot question, because anything over 10, 15, I mean, I'm being even, Mike's looking at me like 5, 10, 15, 12, anything with those kind of $1 million, you know, 8-digit numbers, 10, 20, 30, that's almost assuredly a ballot question. So you have to kind of bake that into the timeline. So I'd be saying you're probably looking towards the end of the decade, best case scenario, to have the police station up and running.
So we may not know.
It's not that far away, it's 2023, 2024 is 5 months away. So 6 years isn't. Remember the pandemic was 4 years, 3 years ago? So,
We're trying to.
No, but seriously, it'll take some years to do.
Quickly, the time, absolutely. Mr. Saccone, you had your hand up
If I
again.
may, from here, okay?
No, come up. Come up so we can say hello.
First, through you. Roberta, I apologize. I may have sounded more adamant than I should have about the police station. It is how I feel, but yet I would just as much love to see that building be senior housing and low income housing and for those folks up not as lucky as a lot of us. But we can't even finish Eaton Place. So if we're gonna talk about senior housing, then you're gonna have to talk about after after Eaton. So we have to strike while the iron's hot. The talk today is about, well, not today, but this is about the reuse. I get it. Soon we'll talk about the police station. I get it. But all the things I stated seem to be falling in place. It's a beautiful building. I'd hate to see us knock it down. I hated to see us knock down that beautiful field house, and lots of us regret that every day to this day. Fool me once. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? And Ted? Okay, then we'll end this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jamie, is it possible, like with many of the other projects and committees and things throughout town, that we do a public survey on this? To just be able to have a mechanism to gather feedback? Because I worry that sometimes with an emotional, historic building that, just conjures up all sorts of memories for people, that they may be less willing to come to a meeting like this or a public meeting or stand in front of a mic, but they might take a few minutes to fill out a survey and share their thoughts. Or if they're, busy working people like many of us are, a 5-minute survey at home in their pajamas is a little bit easier than coming to a 7 p.m. meeting. So is that possible?
Absolutely, 100% possible. I think we got to keep it really short. I'm definitely getting a lot of surveyed feedback that there's a lot of survey fatigue in Franklin.
Reducing.
And I mean, it is funny because I've never heard of that in my life, but I think you know where I'm coming from. We didn't get survey results with some other surveys. We thought we did quadruple the amount of outreach that we've done in the past and got fewer results. And I think the schools do a lot of surveys, as you know. So I think there's just a lot of surveys. So I think we could easily put together a 5-minute, survey with some, maybe after the committee selects, a half a dozen or so choices at least, to maybe have like a 5-minute survey that people can just fill out a Google form really quick and get some basic data. But absolutely, we can do that in-house. And I'm sure once school comes back in session in September too, there'll be a lot more eyeballs, that can follow that along. So I'd be happy to do that.
I'd just like us to be able to say that we tried every possibility to get community feedback.
Well, Franklin Matters and the Observer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, utilize our 2 town publications that send out gigantic newsletters. Like, absolutely, we could get, we could do a broadcast on Franklin TV. Like, there's ways we could be getting, feedback.
Davis Thayer thing with surveys.
Yeah. Do you want us to be?
That's right, you could do
Right,
that.
yeah. Okay.
They will be driving slow on the way by still, so they'll work out this way.
Okay, let's
thank you.
continue
Okay.
on here. This next section is the Franklin School Department studies. That's just for any of us now that want to go in and take a look at this for the townwide comprehensive facilities assessment report and the school department Davis Thayer website. So those are available for all of you, residents and the committee here. Next, we have the discussion on meeting schedule, and we're talking about August 15th at 7 o'clock. Do I have a motion for, do you want to make a motion? For next meeting date to be August 15th.
So moved. Make the motion that the next meeting date is August 15th.
Second.
Okay, so
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That's it then. I ask for an adjournment.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved.
Second.
Okay. Non-debatable.
Okay.
Non-debatable.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good,
Thanks.
good.
So I'm gonna hold